Hey, Nathan. How you doing, huh? Thank you. I just ordered some more color of the day for it. On the blonde, anyway. This is dark, starting to come back through. Didn't even hardly fix it. I forgot what I was going to say. Dang it. Shelby's coming in tonight. She should be here. She might come out and get in here before I'm done. Keep it down. So yeah, I'm gonna bring you a drink. So. I got on here kind of early tonight, so like blowing everybody's mind. Hey, Ori. Beaner, Beaner. Beaner, Beaner, Kara, Beaner. It's bitch. What up? Hey, princess. I love you. Your birthday present should be there Saturday. Hi, bitch. Is this book 2 the one I read before? The the other week, last week or whatever. Okay. I haven't finished it yet. I'm still reading Zodiac Academy. Hey, Billy! Got my contacts in. So, the one with the crowd the other day, that was book one of the Cora Roberts series. Yeah, see, I'll pay. I've slept since then. How you doing, Billy? Come I see Billy down, I want to say Delta down. A Southern girl. Some Delta down going on. Thank you, Vincy. It's Adele radio, so there'll be other first two songs are Adele's, and then there should be somebody different. It's not just Adele, but not. Alright, we ready to get started? Looks like it's 5 after, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay. Chapter 1. I love the cover. Love the cover. Love her hair. Alright, Chapter 1. It's getting hot in here. The handwritten letter clutched in my hand fluttered in the breeze. It having left a sour tang on the back of my tongue. If I let the paper go, the wind wouldn't relieve me of my burden. The elegant scrawl belied the nature of the words. My grandmother was reminding me of my obligation to update her on the other factions. She was head of the order, leader of the elementals, and I was uniquely positioned to provide intel on both the shifters and the vampires. Fair! Rebecca declared with a snap of her fingers. I squinted at the burly man unfolding himself from the driver's seat of a sparkling new black truck. Rhino, I countered. How obscure, Rebecca muttered. Final answer? Maggie asked from her perch between us on the porch swing. Yes, Rebecca and I agreed. Guess the shifter was our current game. Hudson Abbott, the principal, leader of the All-American Pack affiliated shapeshifters, terror of Tennessee, and bane of my life, had gleaned some of my secrets after we joined forces to stop the menace that was killing supernaturals. He had taken it upon himself to keep a closer eye on me by moving into the converted stables on my property. Consequently, alright, you guys remember this one from last week where she weighed the shifter and the vampire and the separate vessels and all that. And then the shotgun wife that Rebecca was cheating with. Was it Rebecca? It wasn't Rebecca that was cheating, was it? I don't even remember. Somebody was cheating on somebody. Was it Rebecca? Yeah, speed dating shifter style. I knew it was something. I don't know. taken it upon himself to keep a closer eye on me by moving into the converted stables on my property. Consequently, I gained a steady stream of random shifters trapezing across my land. Hudson had an unhealthy obsession with learning my secrets, along with the chief of security, Dangerous Dave. They dug and dug. So far, they'd come back empty-handed. But one wrong move from me and my world would turn upside down. Hudson was perceptive, analyzing, dangerous, and downright annoying. He also kissed me like his life depended on it, and I was a heartbeat and hormone away from becoming a notch on his bedpost. You're both wrong. He's a mongoose, Maggie announced. Shifters could sense each other's animal. It was a pack hierarchy and survival thing. A fox didn't want to be challenging a lion. I blinked. Mongoose shifter? That's new. Shifters were larger than their animal counterparts. How big would he be? You know, this could be avoided if you just sleep with him. Get it out of your system, Rebecca said, plucking an imaginary limb off her dress. If it's inconvenient, why don't you sleep? If it's inconvenient, why don't you sleep with him? I snapped. She lifted her nose in the air. He's not interested in me. Hudson Abbott only has eyes for a certain fiery-haired, green-eyed elemental. He'd probably move back to pack territory before the weekend if you got naked and dirty with him. I glanced at her. I'm not having a one-night stand with a male who regards me with suspicion and contempt. Also, what are you saying? That I'm so boring in bed he'd run back to the shifter females before the sun had risen? Don't be ridiculous. You can act bad in bed. Lay there like a sack of... You can act bad in bed. Lay there like a sack of potatoes. She sighed and lifted her hands in the air. This passive-aggressive flirting is making my hormones crazy. Still, it's not a good enough excuse. I will not sleep with someone to satiate your hormones. Spoil sport. Sex addict. Hudson exited the stables and glanced her way. His chocolate-brown gaze collided with mine, and a sinful smile played on his lips. He was tall, with strong thighs. I'll go for that right now. Wrapped in blue jeans and a white shirt that bordered on needing a restraining order with how it was clinging to him. The breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with a rich wild cedar that was purely Hudson. Now I was scenting him like a cat in heat. I sighed and leaned back. He has enough shifter honeys to keep him occupied. I'm simply a challenge. He doesn't want me. He wants to prove he could have me. So cynical, Rebecca murmured. She was right. I was cynical. Cynical kept you breathing. My last relationship ended in my torture and permanent maiming. It was bound to leave its psychic mark. Hudson knew my history, yet he pursued me all the same. Incoming, Maggie said before jumping up and running into the house. The front door slammed behind her. Maggie was a bobcat shifter who had arrived to me alone, afraid and abused. I'd offered her safety, a roof over her head, and food. Oh, that's right. Maggie was the one I had the high pitch for, and Rebecca's the one I had the low. Because she's a vampire, isn't she? Yeah. Rebecca should be sounding like this. monkey sister. Incoming, Maggie said before jumping up and running into the house. The front door slammed behind her. Maggie was a bobcat shifter who'd arrived to me alone, afraid, abused. I'd offered her safety, a roof over her head, and food. In return, she helped to run my bed and breakfast home for the supremely naturally inclined. Watching her emerge into a butterfly was worth it, but Hudson terrified her. It wasn't his fault. He'd outlawed the arranged marriage her father was forcing Maggie into. But while her mind had caught up, her heart hadn't. I winced as he breached the ward, my magic pulsing around him, assessing his threat and allowing him through. No murderous thoughts from the principal today, lucky me. You moved the ward boundary? Rebecca asked. With us being the new popular shifter hangout, I had to, or suffer with permanent migraines. It's dangerous, she mused. It's necessary. The wards used to outline my property, including the stables. Now they looped around the main house and gardens, but excluded the main gate and stables, so the shifters were able to trapeze back and forth as they pleased. Hudson arrived at the edge of my wraparound porch. The barrier was 7 feet off the ground. He tensed and jumped clean over the white fence, landing lightly in front of me and Rebecca. I scratched the letter in my hand tighter, folding the paper so it disappeared into my palm. Ladies, he drawled. His southern lip was faint, but smooth like warm whiskey. Ooh, perfect song. Made my insides melt and my heart pitter-patter. A happy dance against my ribs. We talked about this, I reminded the useless organ. He would tear you to tiny, tiny pieces after touching your outer soul. Steps not good enough for you? I asked, jerking my head toward the steps 6 feet away. His lips twitched. Steps are overrated. I took the most direct path to reach you. I sighed. Principal, what can I do for you? See, I could be nice. My heart rolled its eyes and sulked. Can I borrow a whisk? He asked, leaning back on the banister. It creaked, but held. Kudos to the solid workmanship. Holding Hudson up was no mean feat. His ego doubled his weight. I'll get it, Rebecca said, rising to her feet and floating away in a swath of pale yellow cotton. She was ethereal, timeless, classic. Rebecca was a vampire princess and conducted herself in a regal manner that was bred, not learned. What does the principal need a whisk for? I wondered. Hudson grinned. Pancakes. Would you like to come over for breakfast? I opened my mouth to decline. This was also a game. He came to ask for something, sugar, flour, a whisk, invited me for a meal, and I politely declined the offer. The paper in my hand tripled in weight, and I pressed my lips together. If I had breakfast, I could report back to my grandmother, and she would see I'd done my duty. I make fabulous pancakes. Blueberries are my specialty, he ventured, sensing my hesitation. Fine. He blinked and folded his arms. Fine. I gazed up at him. The sun haloed around his head in the cloudless sky. Fine. I'm a sucker for blueberry pancakes, and if I come this once, you can leave me alone for a month. He grinned. A week at most, and I'm sure we can upgrade fine to exceptional. I rolled my eyes. Let it go. I'd once informed him the man who stole my heart would have to be exceptional. He'd been making a big deal out of it ever since. Rebecca opened the front door and vanished a shiny metal whisk at Hudson. Your whisk. He plucked it from her fingers and smirked. Tomorrow morning at 7. Tomorrow morning at 7. Rebecca's mouth fell open. Fine, I grated out. I'll survive breakfast. It was the smallest and quickest meal of the day. Get in, get out, and report back. Nothing to see here, grandmother. My brain slow clapped at my cunning plan. Hudson turned and jumped over the fence again, landing with the feral grace only seen in cats. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, he called out. Prepare to savor it, Cora. Every single morsel will be an experience. Breakfast is a necessity, not an experience. Oh, I do have to disagree there. Breakfast is my most important meal of the day, and I do love to make it an experience. Oh no, I don't want no bacon. I want the sausage. Then you are doing it wrong. Breakfast with you will be entertaining. I am not your entertainment. Of course not, but what follows should be. Oh, gosh, I groaned and leaned back as he slunk away. We were doomed. You're eating with the principal? Rebecca mused. Is that after a night of hot and sweaty kink or shifter sex? Or is it a fuel up before a morning of hot and sweaty shifter kinky sex? There will be no hot and sweaty kinky shifter sex. Okay, no kink, Rebecca agreed. Help me, I'm surrounded by supernatural sex-starved addicts. Maggie bounced out of the front door, her dark hair a wild tangle around her face. You're letting him feed you. In his home? She whispered. Hudson threw me a glance over his shoulder, grinned his predatory smile, white, perfect teeth on display, and winked. I frowned and narrowed my gaze. Technically, it's my home. Why? Maggie shuffled on her sandals, the soles grazing the wooden floor as she glanced at Hudson. Nothing. Hudson whipped his shirt over his head with one hand and let it fall to the ground. He picked up an axe, left buried in the tree stump. Oh, does anybody see a Thor going on here? I'm talking about Brad Thor, y'all. Not the Thor. I'm talking about good looking Brad Thor. And you guys know the one on TikTok. Lately, I think he's been doing some naked swimming in the creek. Yes, he did. Big Daddy's out on the deck and he's messing with Mom. I do that all the time. Then I get on there. And then I get on there and it's too bright to see it, but I get on there and I'll talk to him while I'm at the office or something. It freaks him out. The wood split in two with a loud crack. Let's get back to Brad Thor, please, okay? The wood split in two with a loud crack. The birds chattered in the trees. I wondered if they too were in awe of the specimen before us. His muscles bunched and tensed with emotion. Holy vampire ovaries, that man is a thirst trap, Rebecca mumbled. Why the hell is he chopping wood? It's not even cold, I pointed out. Does it matter? She shot back. So they've grown again? Maggie said. She hooked a thumb over her shoulder. Do you want to see? I jumped to my feet and followed a twitchy Maggie with my vampire princess sidekick in tow. We trotted down the steps and around the house and outside the house. We passed under some mighty magnolia trees whose leaves rustled in the breeze and entered the garden area reserved for the dead. Unmarked graves dotted the lawn, 25 in total. If you weren't part of a pack or vampire house, you were a loner. Loners didn't have access to consecrated ground and were subsequently denied the rites of passage. I had lots of land and a gift to help those loners pass on. During the final fight with Rick, the elemental, he'd revealed I'd not been simply giving the dead a place to rest. I'd been getting them a backdoor pass to heaven. After crossing Jennifer over, Rick's latest victim, I ceased crossing over loners. Until I better understood the mechanics of my powers, I deemed messing with the Almighty's grand plan to be unwise. I didn't want to draw attention to myself or my activities. Sorry, let me turn it off. My house is dying. This is slightly loud though. I'm sorry. We came to a stop under my largest magnolia tree, its branches draping over the ground, casting a sweet, heating fragrance in the surrounding air. Tom Wakefer was buried here. He should have been laid to rest in the Tupperware tub I'd gathered his exploded body into. But Maggie, in her teenage wisdom and thoughtfulness about recycling, had emptied him into the ground and covered his remains with soil. All creatures have residual magic. It's why we bury our dead in coffins and jars. If that magic fell into the wrong hands, it would be dangerous. White roses bloomed over the plot. They sprawled along the lawn and climbed up the trunk of the tree before weaving among the branches. The roses themselves weren't bad news. Didn't you cut these down a few days ago? Rebecca asked. Yes. Should they be pleading like that? Maggie asked, leaning over to study the crimson droplets rolling over the snowy velvet petals. No. Rebecca wrinkled her nose and stepped back. What does it mean? My gaze darted over the flowers. Nothing good, I answered. Maggie skittered over the ground, the charge raising the hairs on my arms. Magic skittered over the ground, the charge raising the hairs on my arms. The heavy scent of roses coated my mouth like fur. Someone had screwed with Tom's remains. Something unnatural lurked on my property. Something that had corrupted a symbol of purity. Evil. Chapter 2. Mushrooms are the devil's food. It's a little known fact that shifters don't howl at the moon and vampires can sunbathe. Both species had hearts that beat, and being bitten by either resulted in blood loss, but not a dramatic change of genetics. However, the rivalry between the two factions was on point. The only thing they hated more than each other was my faction, the Elementals. We were considered an unstable, unpredictable, and unnatural race, despite our magic being rooted in the elements that surrounded the natural earth. Hudson told me it was because of our gifts, that they couldn't be sure what they were facing when going head to head with one of us. It was more fundamental than that. Elements were embedded into normal society. They taught your children math, dispensed your medication, and advised the president on matters of security. Hey baby girl, we were everywhere. It wasn't our abilities the other factions didn't like, it was our influence. Still, the shifters and vampires used our skill sets. Medical care provided one of the biggest issues for shifters. Hey, they're Navy. Not all of us are Top Gun material. She's making fun of my sunglasses, y'all. Oh, no, just she wears those aviators like Top Gun. Thanks, ma'am. And these are my $1, $1.25, whatever they are now from the Dollar Tree. I don't make the big bucks like she does and afford them $100 Ray-Bans. Medical care provided one of the biggest issues for shifters. There were few doctors in the supernatural arena to see to their needs. I was trained and had the basic equipment to treat 90% of problems shifters faced. After all, their kind didn't get cancer or suffer with heart attacks. My side business brought in more revenue than the bed and breakfast that catered to lone supernaturals. As of 2 months ago, the pack had employed me to check into all shifter deaths. My gift or curse, depending on how you view the world, meant I was uniquely qualified to do this. Being a psychic retro enabled me to view the last moments of someone's life. Rebecca floated through the kitchen door, her nose wrinkling at the fried chicken on my fork. To my knowledge, she was the only vegetarian vampire in existence. It seemed unnatural. "What is that smell?" she asked as she opened the refrigerator. The weird aroma hit me a second later. I dropped my fork. Maggie cooked. Y'all still hear me over this? Let me know, because I can't get it turned down. I got to turn it off. Okay. Maggie could bake cookies. Any kind of cookies. Double chocolate, lemon, oatmeal. She was an expert. Now take her out of that specialty and she could ruin toast. Rebecca reached inside the fridge and took out a full covered glass dish. She peered under the wrapping like she was checking for a bomb. "I think it's lasagna," she stated with a sigh of relief. Maggie bounced into the room with a smile as big as the sun. "You found my mushroom lasagna. It's a new recipe." I grabbed my fork and shoved the fried chicken in my mouth to hide my smirk. Rebecca eyed the dish with newfound horror. "Thank you, I've already eaten." "Nonsense, you can take a bite," Maggie said, snatching the dish and heading for the microwave. "Remove the foil," Rebecca and I reminded her. Yes, I'm not stupid," Maggie muttered, following our instructions and shoving the dish in the microwave. The front door creaked open and the familiar sound of expensive Italian leather slapped against the wooden floors. I got comfy. This should be good. Sebastian rounded the kitchen door and blinked at the microwave. "Too late now, she's seen you. Should have run when you smelled the mushrooms." "Sebastian," Maggie said, grabbing some plates from the cupboard. "Perfect timing to try my new mushroom lasagna." I'll hand it to the vampire prince of North America. He had a Vegas-worthy poker face. He slid into the chair across from me, his eye burning holes into my head in accusation as Maggie presented him with a steaming plate of gray and pale cream slop. He armed himself with a fork and eyeballed the plate. Bella, or the white furry menace, as I nicknamed her, flounced into the room with a mouse between her teeth. She dropped it on Sebastian's expensive loafers, turned, stuck her tail in the air, and slunk out of the room. Bella was a floozy. She offered Mel's gifts. But me, her shelter and caregiver, nothing but haughty looks. Sebastian and Rebecca eyed her with jealousy. Being a cat excused her from sampling Maggie's culinary delights. My plate of fried chicken disappeared and some of the bland slop appeared in front of me. It's better for you, Maggie said with her hands on her hips. Everyone should aim to have at least 2 meat-free meals a week. Sebastian, myself, and Rebecca scooped a forkful and simultaneously deposited it in our mouths. One for all for one. I swallowed, and it came straight back into my mouth, my throat rebelling against the slimy taste. Like slugs slithering onto my tongue. Rebecca's delicate features twisted, and Sebastian chewed thoughtfully. I redoubled my efforts and won the argument with my body. It was heavy on the garlic, sloppy in texture, and the weird little crunchy bits tasted suspiciously like burnt Parmesan. Can I have my chicken? I don't want it to go to waste, I asked. Maggie huffed and held my plate hostage. You don't like it? I'm not a big lover of mushrooms. Me either. Yeah. Me either, Sebastian said, jumping on my excuse and placing the fork on the plate. Maggie turned to Rebecca. And you? She tilted her head. I like the concept, but it needs something. Maggie swapped my plate, and I tucked into the chicken, devouring it before anyone got any bright ideas about stealing my food again. It's Monday, I stated. What are you doing here? Sebastian blinked. Can I not come to see my best friend without intentions? I arched a brow. Sebastian was beautiful. Everything screamed perfection, from his manicured nails to his trimmed 5 o'clock shadow. She's having breakfast with Hudson tomorrow, Rebecca stated. Traitor, I mouthed. She shrugged. I'm living my non-existent social life through you. Sebastian's eyebrow twitched. He invited you for breakfast? Maggie shot him a nervous look. Yes, I answered. Alone? Sebastian checked. I assume so. Is he cooking? What is this, 20 questions? Would you like me to film it for you? Is he cooking? Yes, he borrowed a whisk. He's making pancakes. Blueberry, Rebecca commented. I waved my fork at her. Like she said. Sebastian leaned back in his chair with a huff. He's playing hardball. He's playing with fire, I muttered. But what's the problem? Nothing, Sebastian said. Just don't reciprocate the offer. Wasn't planning on it, I answered. The sooner it was over with, the sooner I could report to my grandmother, because I'll be damned if she was visiting me here. But you still haven't explained why you are here, Sebastian sighed. The Princess of Italy is currently in residence, Rebecca groaned. Maria? She's beautiful, but a bitch. Sebastian ran a hand down his face. Every month it's someone new. The king and queen of American vampires were busy hunting for a suitable bride for their son. Being my best friend, I often ran interference for Sebastian, appearing as his date for the obligatory monthly family meal. King Leon hated me. Queen Aria tolerated me. Fun times. So you're hiding? I asked. I'm visiting my best friend, checking on her healing. I rotated my ankle. It's still late, particularly at night. I'm all good. He nodded. I reached across the table and gave his arm a squeeze. How long is she staying? Until she gets a ring on her finger, I press my lips together. Perhaps you could have a long engagement? He glared at me. The second my father sniffs weakness, I'll be at the altar faster than you can say honeymoon. Rebecca hummed under her breath. I'd offer to be your wife, but I'd cause more drama than a celebrity at a teenage party. He shook his head. No, it's time I addressed my responsibilities. I grimaced in sympathy for Sebastian. It's time? I checked. He nodded. It's time. Oh boy. Chapter 3, Heebie-jeebies. We define insomnia as habitual sleeplessness. I yo-yo between being an insomniac, I can't even say the word, insomniac and a chronic sleeper. When I did sleep, not even the dead could wake me, which was a good thing, as they were often the cause of my unconscious state. Tonight, sleep eluded me. I threw my legs across the sheets, seeking the cool patches of cotton, and concentrated on the luminous sheen of the full moon hung low in the cloudless sky. I don't know, Karen. Find out. Let us all know. I mean, you got it in with these characters. I mean, aren't you like a person that can like check all that stuff out? She herself. Tonight's, let's see. It was closer to the Earth tonight, a supermoon that was a reminder we were both insignificant in the grand scheme of things, and part of this something wondrous. The heavy hum of power from the room on the other side of my apartment taunted me with my ignorance, my arrogance, and my stupidity. Heaven. I had a direct line to heaven. How many of the loners had I granted access to somewhere I shouldn't? How many had sins which weighed their souls and bound them for hell? I rolled onto my back and stared at the slowly rotating fan. The whirling set my teeth on edge. An unusual thrum of power rumbled through me. I puffed, swung my legs over the side, and pattered through my living room on bare feet. I threw the key from the chain hanging around my neck and chanted the spell to unlock the door. My hand paused on the cool metal handle before I pushed it open and faced my demons. A bitter note of deceit tinted the swirl of peace that encompassed me. I duped heaven. I feted at least one soul that wasn't worthy and possibly damned my own. Ignorance didn't equal innocence. The orb in the center of the ring glowed an ethereal white. Wisps of pure energy caressed the ceiling and walls. I grabbed the infused oil from the side table and poured it around the orb in a circle while whispering the incantation meant to close portals. Bitter citrus and sage seeped into the air as the liquid settled in the burnt-out crease left behind by my earlier attempts. I snagged the matches, lit one, and dropped it onto the orb. Fire spun along the floor and intensified the sage. The orb shrank in on itself. I raised my voice and sunk more magic into every word that passed my lips as I commanded the portal to shut. My power sought the cracks and exploited them. It dug its claws into the portal and tightened the noose, drawing it closed. Para de lastimarme. My head snapped to the right. A thin African-American boy dressed in blue shorts and a white t-shirt too small for his body stood before me. He was 7 years old at most. My heart shattered at the lost and pained look in his deep brown eyes. The orb flared and doubled in size, slipping through my neck. Shit. I mumbled as the fiery oil burnt out and left another crisp orchard mark on my hardwood floors. The boy disappeared, leaving me alone with my road to heaven wide open. I stumbled through the door into the living room. "Harry!" I hollered as I flopped on my sofa. My ghostly friend shot through the wall and hovered over my slumped body. He peered down at me. "Are you well?" I ran a hand through my long copper hair. "Do you still feel a pull to this house?" He shook his head and clasped his hands behind his back. "No, not since you destroyed the soul stone. I stay because you need me, not because I'm compelled." My head dropped on the pillow. That's what I thought. So why was the ghost of a 7-year-old child hanging around my house? This was not good. "Should I retrieve Miss Lexington?" Harry asked with a frown. I huffed a laugh and slapped a hand over my forehead. "How would you do that?" A deep frown marred Harry's features. He was still struggling with the drawbacks of being departed, mainly because I was the only person who could see and hear him. "Don't worry," I reassured him. "I'm okay." "Are you sure? It's time for breakfast. Perhaps your sustenance will recharge with your batteries." A groan left my throat as I slammed my eyes closed. Hudson, right? I had a pancake date with Tara of Tennessee. Ah, the first romantic stirrings of true love. Harry lamented. I peeked one eye open to catch him staring wistfully out the window, calm in some long ago memory of meeting his wife. The principal isn't looking for my heart. He's only interested in my vagina. "I think you underestimate the draw he has to you," Harry spluttered. "No, I haven't. When the Terror of Tennessee wants to cook me breakfast, it's for one thing only, and it's not to spend time with my sparkling personality." "He's cooking you breakfast?" "Yes." "In his home?" I sat bolt upright. "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes. Why does everyone keep asking me this?" "No reason," Harry said as he darted through my wall and disappeared into the house somewhere. What the hell was I missing? Had I committed a shifter faux pas? Had I accepted an offer of marriage via pancakes? Just my luck. I swept through my rear garden to check on the progress of the bleeding roses. I hadn't cut them, as I wasn't sure what magic they held. It was wise to leave them alone until I could figure out what was feeding them. I halted next to the giant magnolia tree. The blooms had expanded overnight. Their crimson-stained petals now spread over several grave plots and had invaded 3 more trees. I stuck my hands on my hips and frowned. This wasn't just the residual magic left over from the unboxed remains. It was something more powerful. Someone was tampering with my property. They'd gotten around my boundaries wards and crept into my personal sanctuary. My feet picked through the vines, my sneakers protected me from their spikes. Stopping in the center, I spun in a circle. "What wicked beastie are you?" I whispered. A literal interpretation would be blood magic. Good God, I hope it wasn't blood magic. The damn stuff gave me heebie-jeebies. It was voodoo in the worst way. Like what they portrayed in the movies, but worse. So much worse. I sucked in a breath and bit my lip. Well, there was one way to test it. I bent and ran my finger over the bleeding balloon. The kid appeared in front of me, blood spurting from a broad gash across his throat. I grabbed my neck and fell to my knees. His soul-deep terror and gut-wrenching pain echoed in my body. I wasn't reliving his death in the strictest sense. My corporal body still stood in my garden amongst the murderous flowers, but I'd formed a connection to his tormented spirit, and he was trying to pull me under with him. "Stop!" I cried out. He flashed in and out of my swimming vision, coming closer with each new appearance. Blood splashed across his face, coated his cheeks, his nose, and saturated his chocolate brown hair. It defied gravity. Paro de lastimarme, por favor, he whispered. Hey, Ori, translate that. It looks like it might be Spanish instead of Latin. For the something, please, he whispered before disappearing, leaving me with the rising sun and the sinking feeling that something terrifying had come to White Castle. All right, I'll let you guys do breakfast with Huddy. Chapter 4, My Heart for a Blueberry Pancake. I'd converted the stables a few years ago. Long-term residents were lucrative and not generally problematic unless Rebecca took a liking to them. Then I had to hope they were single. In fact, the building had been transformed originally. What does Lastimar Mace mean, Nina Bina? Originally for the vampire princess, alas, it wouldn't provide her with the hunting grounds for the number of sexual encounters she required. She preferred to swan around my bed and breakfast, picking off loner supernaturals for a night of passion. I hammered my fist on the navy wooden door. A second later, it flew open. He would only be that quick if he'd been waiting for me. My breath stuttered in my chest as I attempted to not ogle a freshly showered Hudson. Barefooted, with his shirt gaping open and still dripping hair, he looked like every red-blooded woman's wet dream. Don't drool, that would be embarrassing. My breath stuttered in my chest as I attempted to not ogle a freshly showered Hudson. I didn't read that part, didn't I? Bad morning, he asked, eyeing me from head to toe. I frowned. Why would you think that? He cocked his head to the sun. You have blood on your shoes? I glanced at my white sneakers, finding dribbles of fresh blood staining them. Huh. I'm afraid the story behind that is confidential. Really? Really. So it's not from the massacred roses bleeding all over your lawn? My mouth popped open, then slammed closed. When in doubt, observe your right to the Fifth Amendment. That's okay, Cora. I can wait for your secrets. Good luck with that. No hostess cakes. Not in this household, please. Although Big Daddy does like his hostess cake. But they don't pay my bills. Little Daddy pays my bills. Just his little Daddy cakes. Oh. He smirked and retreated to usher me inside. I swiped at the side of my lips with the back of my hand. No drool. Outstanding things were looking up. We're eating in the kitchen, he informed me as he crowded my back on the way down the hallway. Heat rolled off him in waves, sending little tingles of awareness along my spine. The room opened up into a rustic kitchen, complete with exposed beams. I'd left some original paneling in as features, including a two-part stable door, which separated the living area from the kitchen. He had the rear door propped open, allowing the early morning streaks of orange and gold to splatter across the tiled floor. He indicated to the waist tall table set back into a nook with two stools. It was intimate. Please sit. He turned and started the gas ring before sliding a frying pan onto it. He moved through the kitchen with an efficiency that spoke of countless hours of experience. Somehow, I'd expected him to be pampered and waited on. You cook? I observed. He glanced over his shoulder as he whisked the bowl of batter. Breakfast would be a sad affair if I didn't. I waved my hand. I mean, you cook for yourself? I like to know what's going into my food. Is that because you're fussy? No, it's because I'm the most powerful shapeshifter in existence. The batter hit the pan and sizzled, releasing a yummy, savory smell. And that makes you a chef? It makes me a target. My heart sank. Someone tried to poison you? Your little is never going to come unglued off your body now. She has on a Baby Yoda shirt, and her youngest is like madly in love with Baby Yoda. I leaned forward and placed my chin in my hand. You're a control freak. And I'm alive because of it, he said as he flipped the pancake. If my eyes drifted to his ass for a bit of shameless ogling, I couldn't be held responsible. There was something about a man comfortable enough in his own masculinity to cook. I'll add that to your list of skills. He spun with a grin as he slid the pancake onto a plate and sprinkled blueberries onto it. Oh, no. Blueberries go in the batter. And maybe they don't go on top. It's just weird. They just roll off. You keep a list on me? I blinked. How did he do that? Turn innocent words into an innuendo. He held up a glass bottle and quirked a brow at me. Syrup? Because that's how you say it. Just so you know. Syrup? Case in point. Always. His smile hit epic proportions. Save me now. The principal was flirting outrageously, and I was not immune. The encounter with the boy had left me starving. For food, not Hudson. Perhaps both. A hug. I need to get out of here. Breakfast, then I'm out. How many would you like? He asked. I jerked back. What? Did he have a twin? I think I could only handle one. He was a lot of mail. Maybe this twin wasn't the 𝐤𝐴𝐻𝑚, and now I had a twin Hudson's in my head. He chuckled as he poured more batter into the frying pan. Pancakes, Cora. Where was your mind at? Dangerous, dangerous places. And the bitch is ready to go for a twofer. 5, please. And it blinked. There were no smart comments about fitting it all in, no rebuke about my weight or size. He simply slapped 3 more pans on the cooker and multitasked pancake flipping like a pro. I was in deep shit. The more comfortable he made me feel, the more dangerous he became. Dragging my eyes from Hudson, I inspected the personal touches dotted around the room. A stack of worn paperbacks set on the shelf, alongside a few framed pictures of Hudson with various people. An apron hung on a hook next to the door, and a vase of wildflowers set central in the window. It was homey and unexpected, but also quiet. A minimum of 2 shifters occupied the stables in the months he'd been here. He squirted some more syrup on the delicious stack and placed the plate in front of me. The copious blueberries toppled off the top. Exactly! Blueberries go in the batter, not on top. Hudson slid onto the stool opposite me with his own plate, his knees knocking against mine, making me tuck my feet under my chair. Don't want any accidental gains of footsie. I pulled free a forkful of fluffy pancakes and popped them into my mouth. Oh my God. The terror of Tennessee slayed at pancakes. This was it. If I had to pick one food that I had to eat for the rest of my life, this was it. It was almost a shame to devour them. I tried slowing down to savor the experience. Where did you learn to make pancakes? I wondered between bites. He chewed thoughtfully before swallowing. Every Sunday, my mother would cook up an enormous stack of pancakes. It was like religion. No matter how many meals we'd miss together during the week, Sunday breakfast was non-negotiable. It was a time to share our week, our worries, and our triumphs. I knew next to nothing about Hudson's past. Not for lack of looking, it wasn't public knowledge and it didn't exist in any database. He was an enigma. My aunt saw the heart of a house as the kitchen and the dining table the base of communications. Friday evening was our night. Aunt Liz would whip up a culinary experience and we would share our week. Even as a child, I was included. I glanced down to pull another scrumptious forkful into my mouth. Family is important to you? I nodded. Extremely. It isn't to you? He tilted his head. The Packs are my family, but also not. You don't have any blood relatives in the Pack? My parents are dead. Way to go, Cora. How to win friends and all that bullshit. I'm sorry. I lost my mother too. And your father? Oops, damn cat was perceptive. Is lost, but I didn't lose him. That's awfully cryptic. He's cryptic, but also uninteresting. Did your parents lead any of the Packs? He smirked. He knew I was redirecting, but was gentleman enough not to point it out. No, my father could have, but he wasn't interested. He paid the ultimate price, his life. I blinked up at him. How? He sighed. The old alpha died, and the three most powerful men fought over the position. My father, Christopher, was the strongest, but didn't fight because he didn't want the position. He was happy to live out his life with my mother. I sensed where this was going. The new alpha didn't like that? No, he murdered him and my mother while they slept. He was a coward. Why not you? He grimaced. I was 11. The Pack takes a dim view on killing children. He was already risking the wrath of the Pack by murdering my parents. Murdering me would have flipped their loyalties. He would have been dead before the week was out. So he let you live in the Pack? I left. I couldn't live under the rule of a cowardly tyrant. Did you join another Pack? He shook his head. No, not until I was ready to unite the Packs. I drifted. I learned their rules, their weaknesses, and their strengths. I put together the best parts of a Pack and eradicated the archaic ways, like the arranged marriage Maggie was bound to. Outlawing it doesn't mean they follow the rules. He grinned. No, but it means they meet swift punishment. For the most part, I leave the Packs to run themselves, so long as they follow the basic rules. Only intervene if needed. Maggie's father missed the memo. He's got it now. My eyes widened and my fork paused. You dealt with Maggie's father? His head tipped down so he could meet my gaze. Their Pack is under new management. I won't tolerate rape and abuse. I studied his face. He'd really done it. He'd taken out Maggie's father and his sniveling, abusive buddies, and he'd not once bragged or mentioned it to gain my trust. Thank you. I'll let her know. Perhaps it will help her heal. You've done a great job of that already. I shrugged and chased some gooey blueberries around the plate before scooping them up and shoveling them in my mouth. The room fell silent, but electricity charged the air. I glanced up to find Hudson's alpha stare fully locked on my lips. I glanced up to find Hudson's alpha stare fully locked on my lips. I swallowed. What? You have a little something, he said, tapping the corner of his mouth. I thumbed the side of my mouth, then sucked it clean. Did I get it? Hudson sucked in a breath, making my eyes snap to him. He leaned over the tiny table and wrapped one hand behind my head. I stilled as my pulse skyrocketed. The cocky smirk dropped from his face as he breathed as his breath feathered over my lips, making them tingle in awareness. His tongue flicked out, and the tip licked the side of my mouth, which parted as a shudder rippled down my spine, and my breath halted in my throat. And I'm pretty sure Karen just swallowed her tongue. Without releasing me, Hudson flew off his stool and rounded the table. His colossal body crowded me as he tugged on my hair to tilt my head back. He wrapped his arm around my back, his palm engulfing my hip. He was a handsome guy, strong, powerful, a hunter, a protector. Everything that made me feel female. Everything that made him dangerous. He held me like I was both precious and someone to ravish. It was intoxicating. This was why I'd avoided being alone with him. I didn't have the willpower to resist what he was offering, however fleeting his attention might be. It was still focused wholly on me at this moment, and when Hudson gave you his attention, you became the center of the universe. Love this song! His mouth descended on mine, his lips and teeth coaxing my mouth to open and let him in. He tasted of summer, sin, and sex. My hands dug into his hair and pulled at the strands. A rough growl rolled from his chest and up his throat, and I swallowed it with a moan. The power of making this beast growl for me was dizzying. Heat unfurled low in my stomach, and electric pulses of pleasure skimmed over my flesh. Wired tight with desire, physical need stretched between us like an elastic band. The inevitability of us colliding in an explosion as clear as the Louisiana sky. He broke away from my mouth and trailed his lips across my jaw to the sensitive part of my ear. My legs wrapped around his waist and drew him closer. He gripped my hips, lifted me, spun, and dropped me on the kitchen counter. His body leaned forward, pushing mine back as his hands swept underneath me. Utensils crashed to the floor as he pushed my t-shirt up and traced his fingers over my scars. I hid my imperfections, ashamed of the weakness they represent. I pushed my hands over his, attempting to cover them. Don't, he growled, my hands still. They are beautiful. You are beautiful, inside and out, Cora. He leaned down and his lips followed the curve of each scar around my ribs. Don't hide yourself from me. What I see is strength, beauty, and an extraordinary woman. He punctuated each word with a kiss on the raised, gnarly flesh. A tear slid from my eye down my temple and into my ear. His tongue flicked out, and embers of desire replaced shame. I sucked in a breath and arched my spine as he kissed the underside of my breast. I'm fighting the urge to flip you over my shoulder and have my way with you, he whispered. I blinked. I couldn't do this, could I? Perhaps for a day I could be Cora and he could be Hudson, not the elemental he despised and the principal. Not Cora, the granddaughter of the leader of said hated elementals. I can't, I started. He grabbed my hands, pulled me up, shoved his shoulder under my stomach, and picked me up. I squeaked, which made him chuckle. My own personal caveman. He took 3 steps down the hall when an intense, low, angry growl echoed from behind us. A tsunami of primitive wild magic splashed around us. My head shot up. A snowy wolf straddled the open doorway, her eyes ochre and piercing as they locked stares with me. Hudson spun and froze. Wendy, get out of my home, he stated. His tone was even, but brokered no room for argument. I tapped on his back, reminding him I was here. He pulled me so I slid down his body and landed with a hug. He gripped my arm and yanked me behind him. I peered around his shoulder as the wolf took another step into the home, defying the orders of her alpha, the alpha. What the hell was going on? Shift now, he snarled. His voice boomed with power that made my knees shake. Most creatures would sink to the floor, even humans. Good job I wasn't most creatures. The wolf dropped to her haunches and pawed at her ears with a whimper. Shift, he demanded. A low whine, which I felt in my jaw, reverberated in the room. She shook her head and pitched forward, teeth gnashing toward us. Hudson lunged for her and gripped her around the neck, pinning her to the floor. A figure blocked out the sun in the doorway, and the pack's chief of security emerged like the Prince of Shadows. He frowned at the scene, examined the chaos of utensils, then looked me up and down from head to toe. Why do you have blood on your sneakers? That's what you took from this situation? My eyebrows rose, and I folded my arms while glancing at Hudson, who was wrestling a wolf to the ground. Dangerous Dave ran a hand through his hair with a heavy sigh. That's the third today. Hudson's head snapped up. That makes 15. 15 what? I asked. Wallabies. My jaw dropped. A wallaby was a shifter who had shed their humanity, and along with it, their mortal skin. They had given over to the wild animal that lay within them and were stuck in that form. A wallaby was dangerous, unpredictable, and also rare. There were known reasons someone became a wallaby, grief and trauma, to name a few, and more often than not, they needed to be killed before they slaughtered a town full of suspected humans. I had only known of 3 wallabies ever. 15 were insane. The holding cells are full, they declared. I clocked this one as she charged through town, heading directly for you. He nodded toward Hudson. Like the others. We need somewhere to store Whitney. They both looked at me. I held my hands up. Why are you looking at me? I don't have prison cells. A bed and breakfast, mortuary. Oh, a bed and breakfast, mortuary, doctor's office, and graveyard. It's hardly a stretch of the imagination, Dave said. Wendy struggled beneath Hudson. I don't have a prison, but I have meds to knock her out for a few hours while you figure it out. Hudson's eyes narrowed. Why would you have meds to knock out a shifter? So I'm good enough to sleep with but not trust? Glad we sorted that out. I rolled my eyes as I edged around the room and moved past Dave. His hand snapped out and caught my arm. Remove your hand, I gritted out. A low growl curled around me, dangerous, possessive, and powerful. I glanced over my shoulder, finding Hudson glaring at Dave. His shirt had torn on his biceps as his muscles bulged with power. He was seconds away from shifting. Let me go, I whispered to Dave. His gaze darted between me and Hudson, a frown settling on his face. He released my arm, and I set off running toward my house. It took me less than 4 minutes to retrieve the syringe, fill it with medication, and return this to the stables to find Dave and Hudson locked in some kind of standoff I didn't understand. I snapped the lid off the syringe with my teeth and approached Wendy. Hudson held her still. What's in it? He growled, his beast close to the surface. I steadied my gaze and stared into his eyes as they contracted into vertical slits. He was magnificent and utterly terrifying. Sedative, strong enough to knock out a shifter, but not harmful. He scented the air like he was sniffing out my truth, then nodded once. I pierced the needle into the scruff of Wendy's neck and plunged the medication into her. She whined before going lax in Hudson's arms. He never took his eyes off me. Take her to the pack house. Put Shirley with Laura and Wendy on her own until we assess her. I leaned back on my haunches. You aren't killing them? Wildies were always killed. It was pack law. They couldn't risk being exposed to the world. He shook his head and stood. These are settled, even-tempered shifters. They have no reason to turn into a wildie. Weird shit always happens around you, Dave commented as I stood. The weird shit only happens to me when you are around. I'd take a long, hard look at yourself before pointing your paws at me. I replaced the cap on the syringe and headed to the back door. Cora, Hudson said, we aren't finished. Oh, but we are. I don't sleep with people that can't trust me. I waltzed down to the stables and left a tiny piece of my heart in the stables. The terror of Tennessee had snuck in when I wasn't looking and stolen it. But I wasn't hanging around to let him take any more. Damn blueberry pancakes. Alright, y'all. That gets you up to chapter 5. So go read the book. Go read book 1 if you haven't already. And then you can start chapter 5. Good night, Ori. Get some rest. Adaline, when you watch this, thank you for letting me read your books. I greatly appreciate it. I will finish them just as soon as I get through with Zodiac. I'm on the last book that's printed right now before the next book comes out, but I'm caught up. It's like probably another 3 days because it's 25% left, but you know how that goes. There you go. All right, everybody. Have a great night, a great weekend, and I shall talk at you later. I'll get with you on the next live read. Love you all. Happy reading.